Welcome to HarmonyTALK, a podcast about dreamers and doers. Hear people from all walks of life tell us about their dreams and the moment they knew there was no turning back as they went from dreaming to doing. This podcast is sponsored by A.M. Skyer, a third-generation family insurance business started in 1920. My name is Greg Frigoletto, your host for this episode. For today's episode of HarmonyTALK, we are excited to introduce two individuals whose worlds have collided, enabling them to work together to make not only their dreams a reality, but the dreams of future generations as well. Today we welcome Bob Buda and Leslie Watnik. Both Bob and Leslie have a history as educators. Bob started in education but moved into the camp world, where he has been a seasoned camp owner for over 50 years, maintaining a passion for providing children with enriching, life-changing experiences. Leslie is an award-winning educator, curriculum developer, and staff trainer dedicating 40 years to children's education, making a difference in the lives of countless students along the way. Together, they are devoted to providing STEM experiences for children. With fervor, they believe that STEM education is more than just a buzzword. It's a key to unlocking curiosity, creativity, and critical thinking. Bob and Leslie, welcome to HarmonyTALK.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us. This is great.
It's great to be here.
It's my pleasure to have you. And to begin, this is a podcast that looks to inspire by sharing stories like your stories that demonstrate that dreams can become a reality, even when there are great obstacles to overcome. In other words, dreamers become doers. Now, the truth is, prior to today, we've had a conversation or two, and when preparing for this episode and trying to put the introduction together, there was a word that kept popping out at me, and the word was fervor, and I used that as I was opening today. And with fervor, I mean intense emotion, compelling action. And I think as our listeners hear this podcast today, they're going to agree that fervor was a good choice to use. So as I mentioned in the opening, both of you have experience working with children in different capacities and share, I believe, in identifying the tremendous value and purpose of STEM education. And for our listeners that might not be familiar with the acronym STEM, STEM refers to science, technology, engineering, and math. And in a bit, we'll get into that in a little more detail when we discuss the recent launch of your STEM Academic Solutions program. But to begin and to create context, I think it would be important to learn a little bit more about your paths. And if you could, tell us a little bit about your past as it relates to working with children. And Bob, perhaps we could start with you.
Hey, Greg, it's really nice being here. You know, as I listen to you, it kind of reminds me of a day when I was 5 years old and my father put me on a rowboat alone, and I rowed into the lake and came back at 5 years old. And I followed that journey as I grew up, and I became a teacher, third, fourth grade teacher, and I found myself doing project-based learning back in the 1970s. I kind of remember putting a Halloween festival together in my room, but the children did it, and they learned by doing. And my family started a camp in 1959, Park Shore Country Day Camp, and I started to grow and learn about innovating new activities with children at that point. But about 18 years ago, a light bulb went off in my head, and I hooked up with a physics teacher in Half Hollow Hill School District on Long Island, and he opened me up to the concept of STEM. How do we innovate and allow children to learn by doing, not just by reading and taking tests? And I started the first STEM camp in my camp, probably the first one on Long Island, and we had 24 children. And it was amazing. It grew to having 90 children, 5 classrooms, a 3-story laboratory, a hydroponics grow lab. And I learned in the 18 years that not only children starving for this, but parents are looking for it also. And in all those years that I've been developing this program, I've interacted with university professors. And there was a day, Greg, that I had a tent at the Port Jefferson Explorium. And that was the moment that I met Leslie. She was a teacher at the time, and she stopped at the booth. And of course, I was selling a robotics program, and she was inquisitive and wanted to know all about it. And I said, hey, we should get together and talk. Something about her clicked. And we did get together, but never really formed anything. And about 3 years ago, I interacted with her again, and luckily for me, she said, I think we should move forward. And that's when STEM academic solutions started to really get strong in an idea. Not so much an idea, it became a business. And we are now partners in STEM academic solutions. And I will say this right on the podcast. I have great ideas, Greg, but without Leslie and all of her intuition and her way of dealing with children and putting things together, she is by far the best I've ever seen in the 18 years I've been interacting in this world. I am so excited with the website that we've created. We just recently visited Sunrise Day Camp. And for those of you who don't know what that is, and I just found out how big it is, they are a camp that deal with children with cancer and the siblings that go along with them. We are giving them our program, and I found out there are 13 locations, one in Israel, and they deal with 80 hospitals with children and cancer. So our business is about reaching all walks of life, all parents, and I will say that the passion that I have, the driving force behind what I'm doing, is I firmly believe 21st century skills of critical thinking, collaborative teamwork, creativity, and adaptability are crucial for the next generation growing up. We see all the issues in the world, no longer just national, but it's geopolitical, it's environmental, it's all over the place. And if we cannot teach children how to solve problems, they're going to have difficulty as they grow up. The world is not what we remember it. It could be great, but the next generation is going to have to figure out how they move through it.
Yeah, you just said something, and Leslie, I'm going to get to you in just a moment here. You said something at the end there of your comments that resonates with me. I was fortunate over my career to be able to speak at commencement ceremonies, at graduation, seniors in high school. And one of the topics that I spoke about during one of those opportunities was figure it out, right? So what we're always assuming as adults is that we're going to be able to pass the baton on to the next generation. And at times, and historically, adults in the room typically think that the next generation might not be able to head us and lead us down the path that we're hoping we go down. So we charge them with having to figure it out. And you opened with a story about your dad putting you in a boat and pushing you out on the lake, and 5 minutes later you returned. In essence, what your dad was doing is saying, okay, you're out on this lake, figure it out. And you did. And that was a great inspiration for you, I'm sure, and a great lesson. And that's part of what learning needs to be. It is about figuring it out. And Leslie, if you could tell us a little bit about your history and your experiences and your path.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having us. This is great. I have sort of been dedicated to children my entire life. When I was growing up, I did not play house. I played school. So I always knew that I was going to be with children. They just are sort of a part of who I am. I always had play groups. I was an education major and went right into teaching. The classrooms that I tended to develop with students were very much of a constructivist attitude in education, where I always felt just naturally that children needed to discover their own knowledge. And I needed to put experiences out there that would cause them to actually ask for the knowledge in order to solve the problem that I had put in front of them, because I always felt that rather than throwing facts at them, it would be better if I threw some really exciting, project-based question at them or experience at them, and then start to ask me how to do things or how to figure it out or what knowledge do I need. And so it really helped me to curate a more active learner who really wanted to know. And it's much easier to teach children who want to know rather than sort of trying to push those facts in front of them. And we were very hands-on. The volcanoes, we built trees. There was always some sort of hands-on project through all of my subject areas. Eventually, I moved into science, which, of course, is extraordinarily hands-on. That's what science is about. And really loved watching the light bulbs go off in children. And in science, that's a constant. If you're doing it right, it's a constant moment of discovery for children. And it really helps to kind of like get their mind flexion activated and moving in. And the natural progression for me was to move into STEM. when I got my master's, my first master's was what STEM used to be called, which was Math, Science, and Technology, MST. And somewhere along the way, they realized that, when you take all of those subject areas and you squish them together, you got a lot of engineering in there. And so STEM was born. I guess they could have used METS, but that word was already taken. So they used STEM instead. And my STEM lab was really a place of unbelievable discovery for children from young ages, from first grade, on up. And what I learned through working with students, and I learned something every single day working with students, especially in a STEM lab, is that no matter what level the student may be on academically, cognitively, physically, there's always a very strong place for them in the space of STEM, where not every child is going to have that explosion of, learning in different atmospheres, whether it's on a sports field or in a theater. STEM really has something to offer to every child. And it is the core of it is at that discovery, is setting up situations where children have to discover solutions by problem solving, thinking, rethinking, the iterative process. It's all to me, that's what STEM brings to the table. And through 40 years of teaching, technology has had an enormous impact on how we teach, what we want our children to learn, how we want them to learn it. And it really has changed the entire learnscape for children over these last years.
Yeah, and I think both of you know I'm an educator. So, Leslie, you're speaking my language. And when you're talking about any type of programming for students and you're referencing things like hands-on, engaged, high interest, inquiry-based, trial and error, it becomes a success just based on those things alone. It's not sitting in front of somebody that's a sage on the stage, let's say. It's putting it in the hands of the students. It's having them discover. And we're going to get into STEM more in just a moment. But if I could, when I opened, I talked about how both of you have a passion for providing children with life-changing experiences. And, again, me being in the world of education, I firmly believe that when you're working with children, and let's use both examples, maybe it's the camp industry or the education industry. In either case, literally, you have the opportunity to change lives every single day. So I know both of you, Bob, even though you started as an educator, you really spent the majority of your career in the camp industry. However, education was kind of intertwined with that. And Leslie, obviously, as an educator, you can speak to this as well. And I guess what I'd like to know from both of you is, do you have an experience that you can recall, as a kid, in any of those experiences that you've had, that was like one of those life-changing moments that inspired you? And, Bob, I see you're ready to go. Maybe you could start.
When I was the camp director in front of a group of counselors and said, can any of you remember at least 3 teachers that you remember? And I'm talking to college students and maybe teachers themselves. And one comes crystal clear to me. Walter Krausick, my 6th grade teacher. He was very into hands-on. And I built, I guess, the first alarm system with bell wire and batteries and a night switch. So when the window went down, it was a closed circuit. And when the window went up, it was an open circuit and the bell went off. And from there, I just had an interest in science. I was actually a bio major and went to the University of Miami in marine biology, but found out it wasn't where I needed to be. I was a people person, not test tubes and microscopes. And that was the journey I took. But I think it all started in that 6th grade class, Greg.
Walter, is that what you said, Bob? His name was Walter?
Walter Krausick. But the interesting thing, Greg, is when I met him as an adult, he was still Mr. Krausick.
Isn't that the truth? And Leslie, what's an experience that you can recall?
So I had the opportunity to take shop when I was in high school, and my teacher's name was Paul Myers. And we actually ended up teaching in the same school district many, many, many years later. But that was really one of my first experiences. And actually, there were not a lot of females in the class back at that time. Females were taking more like home ec. It was a very different type of a situation. And the first time I got my hands on like equipment and making things and creating like I was always artistic and I like to draw and paint, but it was very different picking up power tools. And there was something about the power tools that gave me power as well. And so I actually remember, being able to build things and realizing that I could figure out when things didn't fit together properly, that I actually could just say, wait a minute, I can do this. I don't need a teacher showing me. I can figure out how to get this miter joint to line up properly. So that was the thing I think that always comes back to me, because anytime I'm met with a problem, before I ask other people, I have to stop and I literally say to myself, wait a minute, I can figure this out. So I really feel that having some successful problem solving in like that environment where it was literally hands-on, and I guess maybe I felt a little competitive because I was one of the only females in the class. I reach for that type of strength, and that's actually what I try to pass on to my students, is the fact that they can do it if they just stop for a moment and think about it.
What both of you just described, I think, clearly demonstrates the power of, when working with children, the person in the front of the room has to change lives. And I think those were great examples in your histories. And Bob, if I could go back to you for a moment, I know, again, going back to the camp industry, I think a lot of folks, if they think about the camp industry, they might make some assumptions. And one of the assumptions might be that it's more about hospitality than it is about the curricular piece that it might offer. Do you think, if anybody knows, Bob, it would be you, but do you believe that the camp industry has changed to now include a stronger demand for curricular content?
There is no question, Greg. I go back to 1959 when it was lanyard, horseback riding, swimming, and ball play. I actually was the first camp owner, I think, and don't quote me on this, but went to IAPA, International Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions, held in Orlando. It's a huge conference where all amusement parks buy their stuff. So years ago, we didn't have all these toys. But as the children have grown and we become more sophisticated, camps realize they have to put more into the camps. So the camps of today don't look like they used to years ago. We used to have 15 acres of green grass. Well, I don't have any more, but we had climbing walls, bungee trampolines, go-karts. So it has changed a little bit. But I also believe that there are children that are not the ones who like sports as much. So for the intelligent camp owners, which we're trying to do right now, Greg, enlighten them, I'm not sure they all know that there are other programs similar to the one we've created that can entice children to come to their camp and give the children an on-camp experience, feel part of the group, and get that learning experience that they strive for.
I think what you're describing is really, Leslie, what you talked about a little earlier. So, Bob, you're looking with this program through a camp experience to have happen to the campers what Leslie explained earlier, inspired her, put something in their hands that could change their path.
Greg, I proved it in the last 18 years. I was one of the only ones, I believe, on Long Island with a very intense STEM camp. It was called Extreme STEAM Science Kids. 3-story laboratory, hydroponics grow lab. 90 campers were in that program, 5 classrooms. They were there for a reason, not because Park Shore had a great reputation. They came because they wanted that program. And demographically, there are many cultures looking for more education in the summertime. And as educators, you know, there's sometimes a need to keep the child's mind going, but not necessarily in a textbook. This whole STEM concept is fun, it's engaging, and it helps them open their brain and learn. But Greg, I want to share something else that I feel very passionate about, and that's collaborative teamwork. We set our program up where children are in teams or groups of 2 or 3. Now that has a dynamic built into it. When 2 or 3 children are let alone and they've developed their skills, and now they're set on a path to solve a problem on their own, they have to maneuver on their own. Who's going to go first? Who's going to go second? Who's the co-pilot? Who's the captain? And that teaches socialization skills that necessarily are not always done. And my strong hope, Greg, is that when we learn how to work in a team, maybe somewhere down the road, war might not be as prevalent as is today because we've learned how to work together. So that's a passion I have, Greg.
When we're looking at some of the trends that we see today, whether it's AI or the constant evolution of technology, one thing, Bob, that I would agree with you on is that those are things that surely will be a major part of our future. However, we have to maintain the fidelity of the human experience. We can't lose sight of our ability to work together. I agree. Now, Leslie, you're in the education world, maybe more literally than Bob is, and I think you would agree that in education we are notorious for the overuse of acronyms and buzzwords, and some of them that you've heard probably 1,000 times like I have: SEL, CBA, IDEA, IEP, RTI, PB. I mean, I could go on and on.
MOUSC. Yep, it just keeps going.
You got it. And STEM is one that falls into that category. However, both of you, I think, view it differently. And in speaking with you prior to today, I know you view STEM education as more than a buzzword. And maybe, Leslie, you could tell us why you believe that.
Well, I have seen, and this sort of integrates into what Bob had just spoken about. I've worked with many, many students who come running into my STEM lab, or did before I retired, and red faces, can't wait to get their hands on what they're going to be doing. And for starters, they had to be trained to work in groups with kids that they didn't necessarily know. And so it sort of pivoted them into a situation where they were forced to step out of their zone a little bit, listen to what other people had to say, acknowledge that what they said was a good idea, even if they didn't necessarily want to do it. And these like little tiny things that we have to intentionally teach children really can be brought out in children through the use of STEM. Because STEM to me is one of the biggest changes in their lives. It is a champion for children because STEM provides that aha moment for them. But secretly behind the scenes, they're learning to, again, work and cooperate and to problem solve and to work with others and to listen to others and to try things and not to give up. But I also have had situations where, really bright children, as we're getting close to the summer, we have these conversations of, hey, what are you doing this summer? Aren't you excited that you're going to camp? And I had a number of students say to me, who were really high-end STEM kids, say to me, I'm not so excited about it. And in conversation with them, they really pointed out that in the STEM lab, they are superstars. They are smart. They are flexing their brains at, Olympic height, and they felt very good about themselves. And within the school, they had a reputation of, being this brain athlete. But when they stepped onto a sports field or into a camp that had more traditional options for them, they were the last ones to be picked for the team. So keeping that in mind and thinking about the fact that self-esteem, to me, is one of the most underrated emotions and reflections that we should be building in our students and our children. Because if you don't feel great about yourself, you don't have the strength necessarily to take that risk. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to build children who are risk takers, who get out there and try to make mistakes so they can innovate. It was one of the things that I used to always say in my lab, and the kids would look at me like I was nuts, but I'd say, listen, if you're going to make a mistake, this is the place to do it. And they would sort of look at me and I would say to them, if you're not making mistakes, you're not out on your edge, really reaching and trying. It doesn't matter if it doesn't work. What matters is that you're out there and that you know that you have what it takes to give it a shot. So when Bob and I had met and we decided to kind of, put together our two brains, we were surprisingly coming from the very same spot, which is it's all about children. This is what we do. We dedicated our lives to children, not just that they should have fun, but it's really, when you think about it, it's more building a sense of self and who they are so they have confidence to know that they can accept other people's ideas without it diminishing them or their thoughts. And they can work together and problem solve together. And so basically, really, when we formed STEM Academic Solutions, that's just what Bob and I did. I always laugh with Bob. Bob has his strengths. I have my strengths, and we both know what we don't know.
that's a great segue into, maybe a little bit of a deeper dive into the product that you guys have completed and put out there in the world, STEM Academic Solutions. If either of you could tell us a little bit about it, what is it exactly, and what will people find when they check it out?
I think we together decided that what was very important was to get STEM programs, however we could, into whatever entity that we could get STEM programs into the hands of children. And one of the biggest obstacles places have is that they don't have like a high-tech STEM teacher. So we developed a product. STEM Titans is the name of our premier product right now. And basically, it's designed to give very robust STEM experiences to children without having to have a STEM teacher, but more a facilitator. So the actual program has built-in hints on, set up your classroom a certain way, get batteries for the robots and put them in the robots before the kids come in, get all the kits open up. This is a big cleanup, so it's going to leave yourself an extra few minutes. Here are some instructional tutorials and videos that you can learn yourself or you can show to your students, and the tutorials will teach your students. And all of the links that you would need in order to buy products. Every product is tried and true. I check out all of the customer service parts around the products to make sure they're good. And so basically, we created the curriculum, and then the place that is purchasing the curriculum, they purchase their own equipment. So if they need 5 sets of a kit or 25 sets of a kit, that's their decision. We have links directly to the best. I sourced the links well for price. But the overarching gig here is to get STEM into the hands of kids.
That sounds amazing. Bob, is there anything you want to add to that?
Well, in my experience in camp, Greg, I realized that everyone can't hire a STEM director and 5 teachers, which is the route I took. So camps, let's say in June, wanted to add this program, but their STEM counselor, instructor quit. I still need to run the program, or I don't know where to go. With my background in camp and Leslie's background in curriculum, we put that whole concept together, as she said, because it makes the camp world, it's an easier fit for them to put much needed program into their world when they follow our roadmap.
Yeah, and as you were both talking through that, one of the things I was thinking is that sometimes the best educators know when to get out of the way and just facilitate. And this program looks like it allows somebody to facilitate and generate that excitement and kind of get out of the way and let the students and the children do their thing and learn on their own and discover on their own. That sounds really, really exciting. Well, I can't thank you enough for being here today. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I would want everybody to know I've been talking with Bob Buda and Leslie Watnik, true lovers of learning and creators of STEM academic solutions. You can check it out by logging in at STEMacademicsolutions.com. This has been Harmony Talk by A.M. Skyer, a third-generation family insurance business started in 1920. I'm Greg Frigoletto. Thank you again to Bob Buda and Leslie Watnik for being with us today. To our listeners, continue to dream and keep doing.